It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, as much as I'd like to talk to you about other subjects, the headlines this week clearly are on the New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and the extraordinary report that was filed by the state Democratic Attorney General on Monday that the governor had sexually harassed the staff and created a toxic work environment. Almost every senior Democratic leader in the country, including President Biden, has called for Cuomo's resignation. And still, it doesn't look like Mr. Cuomo is budging at all. You know, I do recall a few years ago that Virginia Governor Ralph Northam faced a very hostile environment after he was found with blackface in a law school yearbook. And we also have the famous E-entertainment scandal with Donald Trump, which he survived. So is there any chance that Cuomo can ride this out?
I certainly do not believe there's any chance. In fact, I suspecting you were going to raise this question, read the report, and my conclusion is the Cuomo administration is over. He happens to still be in the residence apparently, but he's there without the support of the political leadership around him, certainly without the support of the president. But more importantly, this report is not, in any way something that's suspicious in and of its own right. It was, as you said, something he called for. The state attorney general retained apparently 2 law firms. There are 6 people from the 2 firms whose names are on the report. They talked to 170 people. I think they deposed about 50 of them under oath. They reviewed 70,000 documents. And what they found was not just a hostile work environment, which is bad enough in and of its own right, but one that was absolutely toxic, in which these people were living in fear because of his anger in general and because of his completely inappropriate activities with young women. And it's not only Cuomo that's, I believe, at serious fault here. When you look at this report, the senior people around him, whom I do not know, were completely enabling this behavior. In fact, when they were told of the behavior, they really had, no right to determine what they did with that information. Their obligation was to turn it over to the ethics people to evaluate it. Instead, their bold action was to try to eliminate the possibility that young women could be left alone with the governor in his office. So you have a pattern of conduct there that I think is, certainly eliminates him from really further serving in office. He'll either choose to leave on his own accord. I suspect he'll do that when he realizes the opposition to his staying in office is overwhelming. Hard to believe he would ever get reelected for the office. And it's different than the issues you cited, and the experiences we had with Trump were horrific. But this is different. This is a governor who's so delusional that he asked for the investigation himself, that he somehow believes that the conduct he engaged in, he now says he learned from his mother who kissed him. Well, for heaven's sakes, it's sad. I take absolutely no joy in seeing any public official go through this. He clearly has some very serious personal issues he's going to have to cope with in the future. But I do think that this is an important story, and it's in part important because we had moved, I think, quite a ways further down a path of recognizing the importance of a leader representing the best of possible conduct, not the worst. And he clearly set up an environment there that was designed, I guess, to serve his personal needs. And he had people who knew what was happening and did nothing about it. And for that, I do think there should be some real consequences.
Al, beyond what Craig has just talked about, apparently this impeachment process in New York could take months. So it's not just the presumably the crime itself, but it's the other co-aspects of this can be paralyzing.
I basically agree with what Craig says, and it's an important story, incidentally, because a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, people were talking about Andrew Cuomo as candidate for president of the United States, and how far they fall. Look, I talked to the person who I rely on for my New York politics overnight, and he said Cuomo was absolutely toast. And so I agree with that, but I've also known Andrew Cuomo since the 1980s, when, believe it or not, he was an advocate for street people. He's not going to go easily. You know, remember when he did those briefings on COVID, he always talked about New York tough. He's New York tough. He comes from Queens. Like President Trump, the Cuomos like to set their own rules and play on their own playing field by their own rules. And they also like to have a lot of enablers around them, as Craig has indicated. But the real question is, who's going to stand up for him? Most Democratic leaders, including, I guess, the state party chairman, the Speaker of the Assembly, want him to resign. Most federal leaders, the two senators, most members, I think if not all of the members of the congressional delegation. You know, I don't see who's going to stand up for him. But here's what I think is going to happen. I don't think he's going to go easily. The AP this morning reported that 86 out of the 125 Democrats in the Assembly want him to resign. I think he's going to push him to at least start impeachment proceedings and to challenge them to vote, put their vote where their mouth is on that. You know, and once that happens, I suspect that then he probably will resign, so he isn't voted out of office. But you know, one of the things about impeachment is impeachments tend to be partisan affairs, and in this case, it's the Democrats, Cuomo's own party, who are pushing for the impeachment, and that's a big difference. Remember when on Trump's second impeachment, when 7 Republicans voted to impeach, that was the greatest number of people of senators in the president's own party in American history who have ever voted to impeach. So if you don't have your party behind you, I don't really believe the Republicans are going to stand there and protect Andrew Cuomo in office. So I suspect when he finally realizes that the Assembly will vote and that he can't bully him into not voting to impeach him, he'll step down.
You know, Al, I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the 2 special elections for Congress that took place, or we got the results on Tuesday. And so, at least in one case, it was interesting from the Democratic point of view, because it seemed like it was a pushback from progressives in the party. And then there was a successful Trump endorsement with the other Republican primary. What's your take on all that?
Well, obviously there are divisions in both parties. I think on the Democratic side, this is another in a series of primary votes where sort of the progressive center moderate party has prevailed over the left fringe. In this race, the candidate from day one that was going to be the appointed leader was Nina Turner, who had been a big, very divisive, but you know, one of the leaders of Bernie Sanders' campaign. You know, if you believe Twitter and all the activist noise, she was a sure thing. And, you know, a local leader named Shanti Brown quietly built support, but got support of people like President Biden and Hillary Clinton, and most important, probably Jim Clyburn. and build a campaign and basically challenged Turner on her divisiveness on, and won. And this is, it's what happened in New York. The moderate candidate won in the mayor's race. We had a special election in New Orleans. The moderate candidate won in a special election. Terry McAuliffe was the moderate candidate, and he won much bigger than anybody expected in Virginia. I think, most Democrats want their party to win, and they want them to, so we can get things done when we're in office. And the problem with the noisemakers in our party is not that they're evil people, but that they take positions that most Americans can't stomach. And then they try to force the party to be defined by that. And that hurts us very much in swing districts. There was a report this week that the head of the Democratic Campaign Committee said we could be in real trouble. Well, if we're in real trouble, it's going to be in swing districts, and it's the districts where the party's left hurts us. Last week on the funding of the Capitol Police, 3 members of the squad, AOC, Cori Bush, and Tlaib, voted against it. I guarantee you that vote will be used effectively by the Republicans in 2022. So the challenge for the Democrats is to take these votes and for Biden to really assert his leadership on the party as we go into 2022. Now I'll let Craig talk about what happened on the Republican race, even though the Trump candidate won a multi-candidate race with a vote in the 30s, which doesn't seem to be overwhelming support. This is a big, diverse country. And with 435 congressional districts, there are some districts where anybody can win, no matter how nutty or how outside the mainstream you are. There aren't very many, but there are some. And what the parties have to, and they tend to be the safest people, so they also are the loudest. And what the two parties have to do is really put the clamp down on those sort of fringe districts so they don't become defining, because if they do, we won't ever get anything done.
Craig, you do indeed have the last word. What are your thoughts on those elections?
I think I'm going to sum up by combining both of your lines of questioning. And it has to do with the importance of elections. Governor Cuomo is in his 3rd term, contemplating a 4th term. So he's gone before the people of the state numerous times. And it takes me back, and I'm sure Al has heard this too, it takes me back to conversations I've had with Bob Woodward, who talks about how imperfect the election process is to really understanding what's motivating, what's behind, what's in the mind of some of these people who run for office. And it does drive Bob Woodward, and it does drive other journalists to dig deeper. And I honestly think we need more of that. I think the consequences of some fringes in the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party winning elections is I think, unhealthy for the country. I think the electorate wants to see people elected who can govern, who can get things done, and who can honor the traditions of culture and behavior that we all seek to see in people who serve in higher office. And somehow this election process has to unearth more about these individuals. And I hope that voters, as they think about the shortcomings or think about the strength of leadership. We talked last week about the strength of leaders coming together on infrastructure. I hope they give a lot of thought to these individuals who seek office and try to better understand what motivates them and what patterns of behavior that they might expect if they were to continue or get elected for the first time to public office.
Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much. Indeed, we will see you next week.